Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Location: Arlington, Virginia, near the Pentagon. Time: late afternoon, an ordinary Tuesday. Golden evening light bathed the manicured avenues of suburban Washington, D.C. The low sun filtered through the branches of the perfectly trimmed maple trees, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the sidewalks. The air was still warm, laden with the humidity typical of late summer days in the capital. The government buildings, with their sober, massive facades, seemed to silently observe the ballet of cars and passers-by like stone sentinels. Every street exuded order, surveillance, and power. Traffic, though flowing smoothly, remained dense. At this hour, busy officials were heading home, diplomats were returning to their safe houses, and federal convoys were moving imposingly, escorted by armed agents. Here, every detail was coded, every behavior scrutinized. Near the Pentagon, nothing was left to chance: the checkpoints, the discreet security patrols, the cameras at invisible angles, everything reminded us that this territory was the beating military heart of the United States. In the middle of this precise setting, a black Lincoln Continental sedan was rolling peacefully. On board, a lone woman, her gaze fixed and her bearing haughty. She was driving without haste but with a clear determination, like someone who knows exactly where she is going and why. Her face, with its clean, controlled features, betrayed neither fatigue nor distraction. She drove with an almost military ease. His deep brown eyes analyzed every intersection, every vehicle. Not a wrinkle marked her forehead, but her expression spoke volumes about her experience. This woman was not simply a passenger in the capital, she was one of its masterminds. She wore a tailored midnight blue suit, understated yet elegant. Her hair, pulled back in a perfect bun, hung off the nape of her neck. On her left hand, a coated military watch. Inside her jacket, a finely engraved metal badge, General A. Monroe, U.S. Army, Omega Level Access. No jewelry. No outward signs of wealth. Just the quiet assurance of legitimate power. Alexandra Monroe, 47, embodied the elite of the American Defense Force. A former commander in Afghanistan and a brilliant strategic analyst, she had risen through the ranks of a world still dominated by older white men. But she, a quiet, formidably intelligent black woman, had never asked for permission. She had earned every inch of her rise. Today, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, she had spent her day in a secure room discussing cyber threats from Asia and North Africa. She left with critical decisions to convey, simulations to validate, and a meeting at the Pentagon in less than an hour. As she approached an intersection lined with magnolia trees, an orange light flashed ahead. She naturally slowed down. But no sooner had she crossed the intersection than a sudden roar pulled her from her concentration. A police vehicle had just appeared behind her, siren blaring, lights flashing. Instinctively, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The patrol car was unremarkable, but the driver's face wasn't. A young man, visibly tense, was frowning, his jaw clenched, as if he'd already decided something was wrong, or wanted it to be. Alexandra immediately felt the shift in the air, that look. That insistence. That nervous zeal, she had seen it all before. And she knew from experience that this kind of tension didn't dissipate with a simple flash of a badge. Then the voice rang out, amplified by the megaphone. "Park immediately. That's an order." The tone was curt, authoritarian, almost aggressive. Not a word of protocol. No respect for the context. Alexandra felt a pang of frustration rising, but she immediately contained it. She wasn't there to educate a young man in a hurry to be overzealous. But she knew one thing: this kind of scene could escalate very quickly, and even her rank didn't always protect her from suspicion. Alexandra obeyed without a word. With a fluid gesture, she activated the hazard lights, signaling her apparent submission to the orders. The engine stopped purring, plunging the cabin into an almost solemn silence. She slowly lowered the window, letting in the warm evening air, laden with the distant sounds of the city and the occasional siren. Despite everything, she remained unshakably calm. She had experienced far harsher confrontations, situations where her patience had been sorely tested. But this one had a bitter taste of injustice she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the first time she'd found herself facing a judgmental police officer, but the humiliation she sensed this time seemed heavy, palpable, almost insidious. The approaching officer was a 30-something with firm features and a tight jaw, whose fair skin contrasted with the deep black of his sunglasses despite the fading light. His head was shaved, revealing a faint shadow of stubble. He was walking briskly, his right hand already resting on the butt of his weapon, ready to draw if necessary. Driver's license and vehicle documents. Immediately. His voice, firm, resonated with an almost mechanical authority, devoid of nuance. Alexandra turned her head slightly towards him, her eyes calmly staring into his tense face. "Officer, may I know the reason for this arrest?" she asked, her voice clear, calm, firm but still courteous, tinged with natural authority. A slight frown crossed the policeman's face, as if he was surprised at his own patience with a woman he perceived as disdainful. "You ran an orange light. And this vehicle isn't registered in your name. You're in violation, ma'am." Alexandra felt a cold wave run down her spine. Was he willfully ignoring the fact that he was addressing a high-ranking member of the American military? She took a calm breath, exuding a quiet confidence. "This is a Department of Defense Company vehicle. If you'll let me show you my..." "Get out of the vehicle. The explanations will come later." The interruption was abrupt, almost a shouted order, cutting off any attempt at explanation. The officer took a step back, his hand still on his weapon, clearly determined to impose his will. A heavy silence fell. Around them, the quiet murmur of the city seemed to recede, as if held in a suspended breath. Alexandra stood motionless, unmoving. Her gaze met the policeman's, silently defying the underlying condescension. "I tell you again," she said with cold determination, "you are making a grave mistake." But the agent, tense and frowning, continued in a tone that brooked no reply. "Get out. Now. Or I'll make you." Dawson yanked the door handle, his tense fingers betraying his impatience and frustration. But she didn't give in. The door remained firmly locked, reinforcing the physical, and symbolic, barrier between them. The silence grew even more oppressive, punctuated only by the faint hum of nearby engines and the murmur of passers-by, oblivious to the storm unfolding outside. Alexandra, unperturbed, slowly pulled out her cell phone with a measured, almost ceremonial gesture. The golden light of dusk reflected on the screen as she unlocked the device. Her fingers moved with a calm precision, the result of habits forged by years of strategic decisions under pressure. With a steady hand, she dialed a number. Her voice, low and steady, echoed through the cabin with natural authority, without the slightest trace of anxiety or hesitation. "This is General Alexandra Monroe. Connect me immediately with the Secretary of Defense. Code Gamma, 9, Alpha. This is a priority emergency." Outside, Dawson squinted behind his sunglasses. A contemptuous raise of his eyebrows crossed his face. He shook his head, his voice filled with suppressed anger. "Oh, of course. And I'm the head of the CIA? Is this a joke? You're very good at imitating an authoritarian voice, well done. You'll have to explain that to the station, madam." He took a threatening step forward, ready to force the door open. But Alexandra's phone vibrated, signaling that she had just answered. Her hand didn't move. She remained focused, ready. From the line, a deep, calm and measured voice rose, sharp as a blade, filled with indisputable authority. "General Monroe, status report?" A light breath escaped Alexandra's lips, a hint of relief. She answered in a clear voice, without betraying any tension. "Unfoundedly stopped by a local officer who clearly did not know my identity. Intersection of Wilson Boulevard and 23rd Street. I request an immediate lifting of the threat." The silence was brief, then the voice of Kenneth Walker, the Secretary of Defense, answered with quiet firmness. "Roger that, General. Do not move. Pentagon forces are en route to secure the area and ensure your protection." Dawson's gaze instantly froze, as if struck by an invisible axe. His fingers, clenched around his walkie-talkie, hesitated for a moment before pressing the transmit button. His voice trembled slightly, betraying a mixture of confusion and suppressed panic. "This is Officer Dawson. Please confirm the status of the traffic stop on Wilson Boulevard, Black Lincoln." But before he could even finish his sentence, the communications crackled in his earpiece, drowning out his words with a flood of voices and categorical orders. "All units, listen carefully, do not touch the Black Lincoln parked on Wilson Boulevard. Confirmed presence of a high-ranking Central Command officer. Direct order from the Pentagon. Any action on this target is strictly prohibited. Immediate withdrawal." A heavy silence followed this announcement, weighing like a sentence. Dawson felt his heart pound as he slowly lowered his walkie-talkie, his face turning from red to a sickly white. The tension, hitherto contained, exploded into palpable fear. Then, in the distance, the dull roar of powerful engines announced the imminent arrival of reinforcements of another caliber. In less than 30 seconds, a column of black SUVs, impeccably polished, raced down the street with military precision. Vehicles stopped smoothly in front of Alexandra's sedan. The doors opened simultaneously, revealing a group of men in dark suits, their expressions impassive but determined. Each brandished a Pentagon badge with unquestioned authority. One of them, a man of imposing stature and piercing gaze, addressed Dawson in a firm, cold voice. "Agent Rick Dawson, you are relieved of immediate duty. Surrender your weapon and badge immediately." The young policeman, now pale and trembling, no longer dared to utter the slightest objection. His dry throat barely emitted a moan as he slowly removed his holster, his hands betraying his confusion. Alexandra then opened her door, her straight, imposing figure immediately capturing attention. She fixed a hard, steely stare on Dawson, who lowered his eyes, unable to face this authority he had ignored. With slow steps, she advanced towards him, her icy voice cutting through the twilight air. "You looked at me without ever really seeing me." She paused, each word falling with immense weight. "You believed that a well-dressed black woman in an official car had no place here. You acted with arrogance, but above all with culpable ignorance." His gaze became more intense, filled with an undeniable truth. "In our profession, ignorance is unforgiving. It can cost lives." Dawson, now small and vulnerable, could only take these words in. She stared at him one last time, as cold as a sharp blade. "Next time, learn to recognize real threats. And real power." Without another word, she turned away and climbed into one of the SUVs. The door closed behind her with a sharp click. The black vehicles drove off silently, disappearing into the streets like silent shadows, leaving behind a stunned Dawson, alone with his mistakes, as evening slowly enveloped the city. A few days after the incident, life returned to normal, but not without its scars. Rick Dawson, the young officer who had failed through arrogance and ignorance, was officially suspended from his field duties. His superiors, while condemning his actions, offered him one last chance at redemption, a reassignment to administrative duties, far from the streets and direct confrontations. During this time, he underwent an intensive and rigorous program, combining training in military protocol with mandatory sessions on unconscious bias and diversity. He was shown, through testimonies and studies, the devastation that bias, however unconscious, can cause in situations where people's lives and national security are at stake. Behind the scenes, the Defense Department issued a brief and discreet statement. Incident closed. Internal measures taken. Neither the agent's name nor that of the general were mentioned. Yet, in military and political circles, the affair caused a stir. This simple text concealed a clear message: zero tolerance for arrogance and lack of discernment, especially toward those in legitimate authority. Meanwhile, Alexandra Monroe returned to her work with the same rigor and poise that had forged her career. She immersed herself in complex cyber threat issues, coordinated sensitive operations, and participated in strategic meetings where the future of national security was at stake. On the surface, nothing had changed. But deep down, the experience had reinforced a profound conviction: neither fear nor contempt could ever stop her. She had crossed war zones, faced enemies both visible and invisible, and maneuvered through the most ruthless political games. An overzealous, albeit arrogant and ill-informed, agent had failed to shake the spine of a woman whose resilience was as strong as her authority. Alexandra Monroe knew the fight for respect and equality would be a long one, but she was prepared to fight it, one battle at a time, with the same determination that made her a leader.